人間たちこんにちは。Scarlet Nexus へようこそ。Hello humans, you're joining me on set today. We've been working with Diva Agency, who are commissioned by Bandai Namco Entertainment to create a cinematic experience to promote their new game, Scarlet Nexus, which released on the 25th of June. It's an action-packed roleplay game which is already receiving some wicked reviews, and it's released in tandem with the anime of the same name, all built in the same universe, so go and check it out. And we have had a lot of fun creating the mega cityscape that you do not see in the window behind me. Let me show you how. As there are a number of shots in the promo that require our cityscape to be motion tracked with the live action footage, we opted for a hybrid approach, combining a layered digital cityscape with practical miniature photography. This way we can create parallax between the buildings at different depths as the camera moves across the window, whilst achieving the most realistic pyrotechnics in our hero buildings. So while our digital artist builds the cityscape backdrop, we concentrate on the miniatures. To create the basic structures, we created three-sided flat-pack style building designs, which the fine folks at Bristol Design Forge laser cut for us out of 3mm ply. Once we'd given them a coat of paint as a base colour, we started work on the window details.
So for our building windows, the effect that we wanted to achieve was to have a front surface that had some degree of reflection and to be able to backlight them. And because we're up against it in terms of time and materials that we can have access to, we went through a bit of an arts and crafts session. So initially we tried this very thin cellophane. We initially offered that up on the rear of our building frames and it's just a little bit too thin. It tended to want to rip when it was under tension to give us a nice solid reflection. So then we switched to acetate sheet, which I think is 240 micron thick clear plastic. And as you can see, this is a lot more rigid, holds more of a uniform kind of surface that when we put on the back of our building frame, gives quite a nice front reflection of our windows. So after we attach that with glue, we then back it with some diffusion or tracing paper in this case. And what that gives is it gives us a fairly uniform lit result to any backlight that we might have, but yet still have the reflective qualities of a glass windowed front.
We're building 3 in total. The one I'm working on is essentially a big light box, which will illuminate from the open back with an LED panel light. Got to be really careful with applying the glue though. So we're using super glue, but I'm actually using this to do most of the application, particularly when I'm just putting some little dibs and dabs in these bits, because the frames to these windows are so small. We don't want it all kind of spreading out and spilling. Yeah, I've picked the one with 1 million windows, which means I'm having to be quite sort of dainty with my moves. So I've started adding some layers of different coloured gels to our windows of our skyscrapers, and I'm basically creating like a floor of this colour, floor of that colour. I don't want to go too wild with it. I did go for one half blue gel, and then what I'm really into is a bit of plus green. It's really subtle. This is kind of a correction gel. If you've got a light that's a bit too pink or something like that, you could throw a plus green, either quarter or eighth or whatever, over the top of it to try and get it back to a daylight or whatever it is you're trying to match to. But actually for this it's really great because it's really subtle, so it's going to give us some variation in the floors, in the lights of each floor on the building, but it's not going to be like crazy different. It's more like on this floor they just use a different kind of bulb that's a slightly different color temperature. So I started out using one kind of super glue, which was kind of like water, and that's why we've got these kind of blobs that sort of spread on the trace quite a bit. We've now got some of this stuff, which is more like a gel. And that's actually working really well because it means I can really create quite an accurate bead, and it just remains there and actually quite visible because it's a little bit three-dimensional. You can sort of see the light and shadow of it, so it's actually easier to see as well. Speaking of easy to see, I should be using a light box to put this stuff on, because trying to see the lines through essentially darkness is, yeah, it's tricky. But hey, it's all part of the fun, right, kids? To get the most out of our budget, the second has been designed with different styles of windows on adjacent sides, so we're actually getting 2 buildings in one. This will be internally lit with fairy lights, and we've designed it so that each set of windows are in fact the same size as seed tray pots you can get for germinating seeds. This way, each set of windows can be isolated from the others, and we'll be using flash bulbs to light them up as though there are explosions going off inside.
Just want to give an impression of some light coming from behind the window, with some, ideally with a bit of depth behind it, so the light isn't right up against the window. And these planter containers work brilliantly because they're already partitioned, very lightweight, have a hole in them already, so we can just rig some very low power battery LED fairy lights, and with a bit of diffusion work quite well for our windows.
The third is our hero building, which will be rigging with mini pyro charges to give those big impressive fireballs. For these, JP's created bespoke charge boxes which he mounts to some of the windows. The charges can then be inserted into the back with a magnetic attachment system to hold them in place, making it easy to replace the charges when we're shooting. We try some test charges to check everything's working as it should and that our explosions are scale accurate.
3, 2, 1.
Phones are so ridiculous now that we just use that to shoot our 120 frame tests. We then assemble the buildings, and I reinforce the corners and add thick applied bases to give them strength and weight.
Yeah, almost for the same reason that I love wood, I find it incredibly frustrating as well, which is that it's so flexible, so you can sort of bend it to your will when you need to, but also it kind of has a will of its own and likes to bend in other ways that you don't want. Because we've added some fire retardant spray to this, and it's naturally porous, so it sort of absorbed that and then bent itself. So we're kind of using all of these fixing methods to straighten it out again.
We're going to be shooting these in passes, so we need to be sure they're not going to move between takes.
Yeah, so that looks pretty square on these front sides. A little bit bent on the backs, which is why. Cut these. I don't even know why these are covered in so many staples and bits of paper. Recycle and reuse. Don't ever pull staples out of anything with anything other than one of these, which is, designed to do exactly that. What I've done is just cut these just that little bit short, the idea being we can then sit our rooftop in there and it's actually slightly recessed. Because, you'd have a ledge at the top of a skyscraper, right?
Watching glue dry?
Pretty much.
With whatever remaining space we had on the laser cutter's bed, we just added a load of long thin pieces to be cut so that we could add some 3D details to our skyscrapers. Once we put those on, JP then went to work with his airbrush to add some weathering. As we're going to be inserting our buildings into the cityscape digitally at various heights, I make gangplanks for each building so we get a nice clean edge at the base. This also means I can light them from below to mimic street light or ambient light without the table getting in the way and causing shadows. Our plan is to be able to stack these buildings on top of each other in post to create more variations, so the lighting must remain consistent across that bottom edge.
So this is one of our gangplanks. You can see that I basically cut it so that it's actually overhanging it. What we want is just a completely clean line all the way around the building, so that we can then multiply it or whatever. We don't want anything coming out over the edges. So that should make it nice and clean. I'm going to screw it to this plank. It helps us in a few ways. It gives us a completely clean edge around the building, but also it means that I can bounce some light off the floor to create uplighting as though it was street light. If it were just sat on the table, I couldn't really do that. I couldn't really bounce anything up. The lights would be too close. So actually, by having the building coming out from the table, it gives us a nice clean edge, and I can uplight it like street light.
Speaking of lighting, it's time for me to start prepping for our various passes.
We keep in some of the blue so we can use that as our blue screen to create a map, but then I'm also going to set up a blackout for when we do the pyro stuff, so we've got nice clean keyable blackness going on around the explosions and things.
Reusable cable ties, people. Get rid of that single-use nonsense. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. So we're shooting on the Blackmagic 12K, all the Ks, today. The benefit of this is that we can shoot at 4K at 240 frames a second. So that's going to be perfect for our Pyro. If anything, possibly even a little bit too fast, but we can always speed up if we need to. But having that frame rate is amazing. We've stuck it on an adjustable L bracket so that we can then flip it to portrait and get all the height that we need. So when we do the Pyro stuff, we're getting any smoke coming up and things like that, we're going to capture it all. We've got a sweet new toy to demonstrate here. JP.
Yes, courtesy of the fine guys and girls at Cobra Firing Systems, we have a wonderful wireless firing system.
Yeah.
So for this application, we're going to be adding some interactive lighting, flashes, using flash bulbs. Our favourite.
Our favourite, yeah, from the Clouds days. Remember when we set up those strafes of light flashes using old flash bulbs? So we're using the same flash bulbs. We've just got a far more robust firing system, thanks to Cobra sending this incredible unit through.
Yeah, so we're going to be using one of their portable receivers, and
These are so good.
these are great because the option that we've got rigged right now is just with a regular terminal block, so we can wire our flash bulbs in with just quick connectors, and all we're going to be doing is walking around our model, firing off flash bulbs at high speed, so we get some interactive flashes and reflections hopefully in our windows. Yeah,
because we're going to do some explosions like blasting out of buildings and things, but really I think the idea behind this ad is that there's just a huge like intergalactic fight going on the streets of this city. And so actually, yeah, there'd be some hits hitting buildings, but I think most of the action is going to be going on at street level. And so for a lot of our sort of pyro effect, actually we're just lighting up the buildings, like there's explosions going on the streets. And that's why we've used our acetate to create a kind of nice reflective window surface. So hopefully that's really going to catch some of these light blasts going up.
let's do it.
Yeah.
We shoot our window light passes, an ambient pass, and then to make the most of our reflective windows, we shoot passes using a string of LED lights held at different angles to create a sense of the various city lights being reflected in the windows. Although we're not rigging any pyro on this one, as with all the others, we are shooting some flashbulb exposures against the exterior to mimic street level incendiaries.
Oh, it's another building. And the main reason we're going for a nice, like, clean blue screen key for this one and not the others. The others, because we're adding some interest on top here, you know, they're quite detailed, so we wanted to make sure it was a nice, cleanly lit blue screen so we get a real clear silhouette. So just going to get a couple of passes with this, just flagged it off with a bit of this stuff. We're just going to create some like lines of light along the buildings, because in the anime, the Scarlet Guardians are connected through telepathy, which is visualized by red light. The name Scarlet Nexus actually means red connection. And we'll just do it as a pass, so we'll just kind of hold it steady, and then in the comp, JP can then just have it kind of flash by, and we'll just do it at some different angles on the buildings, just so that we've got it there. So if they do decide, oh, okay, I want to have a flash here, we've actually got some real lighting going on the buildings that we can comp in with those light flashes.
Firing in 3, 2, 1.
With all these various lighting and pyro passes of our buildings, we're left with an almost infinite variety of options that we can then insert into our digital cityscape. So while we used the digital build to fill the frame, that enabled us to focus on creating a handful of miniatures that have the benefit of real lighting and pyro effects to bring that sense of realism.
Yeah, boy! That's what I'm talking about. Yeah. That was a big one. So we've done a couple of big blasts and they pretty much light up the whole building, which is pretty cool. But I also kind of feel like it would be good to have some smaller explosions that are just maybe lighting up just like the lower part of the building for some more ground level stuff. So we're just going to pop one of our flash bulbs into the tube, and that should just sort of snoot it, essentially, snoot that light, and just get a little more localized. You could probably use something like a Pringles tube or something like that, but this is just what I have. I might actually cut this though, because it's just really unnecessarily long. Don't saw like that, it's dangerous. In the dark, against your knee.
So if we shoot some individual fireball elements, what we can then do is drop it in and amongst different layers of the city. So we can dress it in front and behind of the elements that we shot today in terms of the building explosions. And it's just to add that epic nature of larger explosions happening in the city.
Yeah, because our CG city is essentially built in layers.
Yeah.
And so we can actually have some going off in the deep background distance, lighting up other buildings, just showing that this stuff is going on everywhere, right?
3, 2, 1. White dust that we're going to shoot as a separate element that's going to simulate the kind of rising dust that you get from either a collapsed building or something impacting the ground. So we're just going to shoot this against black and light it from below.
What I'm loving about this gig is that we're on this really cool set right now, cyber vibes. But just 2 days ago, we were blowing up miniature skyscrapers in the corner just over there. I think the smell's gone.
I gotta be honest, I kind of want to keep this here, you know? I'm enjoying this vibe. Probably lose the green screen though, you know? Matte painting. Right, I'm out. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, drop us a like, give us a comment, and all that good stuff. Sayonara.